welcome to the second episode of Performing the Arts. My name is Bryan M. Davis, your host for this podcast, interview show, whatever you want to call it. Joining me today is
Hi, I'm 64-bit wanderer or Blaine Carvalho, singer, songwriter, producer, uh, extraordinaire.
it's a jack of all trades, really.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I'm talking to 60-bit wanderer or Blaine to his friends and family and pretty much everyone else. His
Yeah.
co-workers, everything else. I'm talking to him about today about his work as as he just said before, a singer, producer, that sort of thing. So, how did you get into the background of essentially becoming a singer? Was it something that sparked you when you were younger, or was it something that sparked you when you were older, or was it just like a passing hobby, that sort of thing?
Well, when it came to singing, it never really was like my first intention. Like, I got into playing music and being in bands and doing that whole thing by like playing guitar and doing that. And I was in a bunch of like metal and like hardcore bands back in the day, like around like Hawaii. And Um, yeah, I honestly did it kind of like on the side because I listened to a lot of heavy music, but every now and then there'd be something with singing and, learn something on the acoustic guitar and just try to sing. And it eventually became something I got more passionate, like impassioned about, like as I, got like more and more into doing stuff on my own.
Uh, so when you got into singing and all that stuff, was there a particular moment or like a particular band song that kind of like sparked that thing, or was it like?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely. I think honestly, sorry to interrupt.
no,
To I would say that it was Anthony Green, who is like an alternative music, artist, and his singing style and the way that he sang was definitely the reason why I tried to sing in like a high register for sure. As I got into different music and I got into different things, it evolved and it changed. But what originally got me singing was like a lot of that early, like Anthony Green, Dallas Green, Alexis on Fire, Seosin type of like post-hardcore type of music, and that really kind of shaped the way that I like to sing and like the melodies that I like to use.
I've heard your music mostly from the snippets you post on Instagram,
Thank you.
which I will help you plug at the end. Trust me. Uh,
Okay.
in the snippets that you post, it does have a very like electronic beat, like almost like not I'm trying to remember like an electronic beat.
Yeah.
How is like what's the process of creating those beats? Is it just like you in the studio for like a few hours, or is it just or is it like a step by step process where you know the beat? And it's sort of like when you're writing a song, it's like you know the lyrics and everything, but when you want to know the beat, is it just like I gotta take a couple of days to figure out this beat, or I got to take a couple of weeks to figure out this beat, or is it just like what is your process of actually creating a song? Because lyrically, it's easy to do lyrics because
Yeah.
it's like once you know the beat and the thing, the lyrics come like that. But creating a song from scratch, especially if you just the artists themselves and you're not within the band, because if you were in the band, you would have a lot more people. But since you're by yourself, by yourself,
Right.
what is your process essentially creating a song essentially from scratch?
That depends on like what my goal is. I do instrumental work a lot of the times too, as well as stuff with me singing on it, and I like to do both and kind of flex on both. So the process for usually my beat making is it to me it's like finding a sample and find or making a good beat. You don't have a really good project when it comes to like lo-fi and like hip hop and things like that. If you don't things don't really pan out if you don't have those things in check. If you're focused too much on like just the lyrics, if you're focused too much just on like a visual aspect, it does show. The music of hip hop is definitely a big thing and a reason why I do what I do now. So I try to show that in my production style. So oftentimes I'm doing it just fresh and clean. Just I'll just be like, I want to work on something, and I have my computer, so the studio goes with me wherever I go, and I just kind of put myself into that moment. And oftentimes it's a trial and error thing. Like I can get something good going like the day of, I'll listen to it the next day, and then kind of adjust it. And it will take sometimes it is, I don't really have like a time limit for myself. Sometimes I've written stuff in like a couple hours, and my buddies have gone on it and used it for like their projects, and it all sounds great. And then sometimes I take months, so it does depend on like what I'm trying to convey within that. So yeah, that's usually how I go about it. I'm usually just kind of thinking like, what am I doing with this particular project, or what I'm going to do. I think of like an idea for like a project, and because my character is mostly fictional, like I want to make him like a character. I try to figure out like ways to kind of tell that story that I want to tell through the music or through like the concept of an album,
Yeah.
like lyrically.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. I mean, I'm not a music person per se, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do listen. I do listen to music. Okay, I'm just not a musician. So,
Right, right.
but I know what you're talking about, like telling a story lyrically, but also musically, because I've listened to albums that are essentially like almost still like Dream Theater has their own like almost every other album has a theme or a story that is telling between the song.
Yes, exactly.
If you're listening to Metallica, it might not be a lyric thing. It's just that
Yeah,
it just might be a lot of these songs just with just different themes altogether. But if you listen to bands like Dream Theater, Pink Floyd,
yeah.
stuff like that, they have albums that are essentially stories. So what you're saying is essentially what you're trying to do is like almost build upon that type of like ideology of building up a story in terms of an album.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely, absolutely.
and speaking of albums, how many albums have you produced since you mentioned you are a producer and all that stuff? But
Um, let's see. Oh, sorry.
I was about to rephrase the question. How many? Because you, as a producer, you also produce other work. So how much stuff have you produced for yourself as your for your 60-bit Wanderer stuff, but also how many stuff have you produced just regularly as a producer?
Usually when it comes to like, luckily, honestly, a lot of my collaborative efforts are with people that I've met out in New York City. Shogun, I've done a lot of stuff for him, and rightfully so. We've kind of developed our styles together, especially out there. Worked with another friend out there, Hassan, who's slowly building up his stuff. He hasn't completely released everything yet. I've also worked with uh, Devonte Forbes, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
He's fantastic, and just yeah, I like working with him. But yeah, as far as like full projects of other people's, I've got like certain things like in the works, but it's mainly been like singles and stuff like that for now. And it's been really really fun, and getting to moving from Hawaii to being in New York was why I was able to kind of get into the collaborative effort on that instead of just kind of doing it in my group of friends around here.
Speaking of singles, is it much more harder to do? I mean, in your expertise, what is the most excuse me, what is the most like easiest thing to do? Is it to do like a EP thing where it's just like just a couple of singles, or is it just try and produce a full album, which is and trying to get that out, which you know,
Uh,
uh, yeah, that's what I'm trying to. So I was like, what's the difference? Like I think you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down, but yeah, yeah. When it comes to like creating like a full blown project, to me, EPs get the job done in a really condensed way because I'm very punk rock in the sense that I don't like an album being, a couple hours or like, super epic and long, unless it like needs to be. Like you mentioned Dream Theater and like Pink Floyd, like those albums justify their length because of like what's going into them, you know. And I feel like a lot of artists in like R&B and hip hop nowadays release like these crazy long albums but don't have like a substance or like a backbone to it to like support it through that whole, like, if you're gonna listen to it you're just gonna hear a lot of the same stuff. And yeah, so for me, keeping it short and sweet and condensed, but easy to understand and good for people to like come back to and repeat is always my goal when it comes to creating stuff. So I stick to EPs, but sometimes that can be just as much work. It really depends on like the scope of it. Like the EP that I'm currently working on with a buddy of mine, Sean, uh, we are it's taken us a long time to just kind of formulate all these things and get these things together and communicate. And of course, like with Corona, things have changed and all that good stuff. But yeah, that's usually like my philosophy. Is I like to keep it short and sweet. So EPs, singles sometimes, but like with the beat tapes and like the EPs, I keep it usually like 9 to 10 songs max and just kind of need to say what I need to say.
Ah, okay. Are these singles also because it's an EP and not like a full album? Are these singles a lot more condensed, or is it just like almost almost like an album, but still not like an album? Are they literally like 2 to 3 minutes, or are they like almost like 4 minutes, 5 minutes?
EPs can be like an album because it really depends. It's usually like 5 or 6 tracks, sometimes even more. Like I've seen like 8 or 9 tracks on an EP, and oftentimes I do feel like you can get, if the artist's intention behind it is to get something across, they can, because it's is more condensed. You know, you have the audience's attention for that amount of time, like usually like 15 minutes, 20 minutes for like an, for like an EP. And that's a nice little bite-sized thing. Like if you're going to work, if you're going, anywhere, you can listen to it and have someone digest it and really get what you're trying to convey a little bit more. But full albums are great. I just feel like with those you really need to have your scope and your ideas set.
Now, you mentioned equipment before, and you mentioned computer.
Yep.
What type of equipment do you use in terms of creating and crafting this music? Do you use a certain program on your computer, or do you have physical stuff that you use and you use your computer to sort of like record all that stuff? Was it like a mixture of a mixture of things?
It is a mixture of things actually, because I have a Logic Pro on my computer, which I can record things, but it has like preset like synths and keyboards and things like that. I usually find the drums on the internet. I search for drum samples. I'm always looking for like a good sounding drum sample, um, and usually I create those on my own. Like I find just the things separately and then make my own beat. And then when it comes to everything else, if it, I've done sampling. I've taken, my guitar riffs and recorded them because I have like, all my guitars and things like that. And I do have like a mini keyboard and an MPC pad. Like I have a bunch of things just to kind of give me the feel. Though I've worked with a lot less for a lot longer. This has been a long time coming to like get to this point. But yeah, it is always a mixture of things. I don't like to kind of stick to one thing. I dig analog equipment way too much to just stick to digital the whole time.
I hear you. Now, you mentioned Corona before, and this is sort of like the elephant in the room, but
Oh yeah.
Corona has essentially kind of hurt the entertainment community in more ways than one. Not only is my bread and butter, which is theater, kind of like crippled for now because there's shows that are essentially closing on Broadway, especially musicals, that's all that stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
that's crazy.
yeah. And I know that New York City is finally reopening, and well, not finally reopening, but in their phase one of like reopening everything.
Mm.
Uh, in terms of pre and post coronavirus, how was studio spaces were for you? were studios always good for you beforehand, or have you used studio spaces during this time now? And like, where do you see yourself still doing that? Do you still want to use studio spaces, or just figure out a way to do this like just by yourself in your own room somewhere, soundproof padding around you, doing your own little thing, microphone right here, almost like a voiceover artist, that sort of thing.
Yeah, what's funny is I know there are a bunch of studios in the state of Hawaii, but on the Big Island there are only a few, um, unfortunately, that I'm aware of, but haven't really been able to afford. So honestly, all the music I've recorded, even up until this point, has just been in my room in either this space or a different space, um, just doing that. I'm definitely what you would classify as like a bedroom producer or whatever. But that's just the way that I've got it done and the way that I've learned. And luckily, my job is with live events, so I get to kind of apply what I learned and learn new things, and kind of benefit each one. But yeah, especially out here in Hawaii, it's a bit different. Shows aren't as frequent, things like that aren't as frequent, especially for the specific genre that I'm aiming for.
Now that you
Yeah.
mentioned Hawaii, I do want to ask you something. You are a uh, Hawaiian, right?
Hawaiian is definitely not the word to use, because to be Hawaiian is something really not a privilege, but it is a blood thing. It is like a race thing. So yeah, I'm from Hawaii, but we don't call ourselves Hawaii. We just say that we're from Hawaii. Because I get that, like, the New Yorker, the Californian, like, that's where you guys are coming from. But it was really interesting to kind of explain that, like, no, that, like, don't call just anyone Hawaiian. Like, you have to make sure that they actually do have it in their blood, because it is like a serious thing out here.
Okay, my fault now.
No, 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 no worries. I always enjoy explaining it to people and educating, because that's one thing that people kind of need to do out here a lot more often.
I'll probably cut that part out just during editing. Uh, uh, just on my part alone. But yeah,
All
on
good, all good.
on Hawaii though, you mentioned live events. What is actually the and you mentioned Hawaii has like very limited events, maybe or something like that, like concerts. I assume when you do go see concerts there, you kind of get inspiration, sort of like that. Are there very it's like, but give me like almost not like a day by day operate like basis, but like a day, but give me like a moment of your time of what you do essentially do as your profession there.
Okay, so essentially with Hawaii, I live on the Big Island, which is not like Oahu. It doesn't have like a city. It doesn't have like a lot of the stuff that Oahu has, which is another island that a lot of people just assume is Hawaii because that's what's on TV. That's
Yeah.
Hawaii 5-0, all that kind of stuff. Like that's where it's shot, and yeah, um, Oahu has a great music scene, has a great like a great outlet for this kind of stuff. But where I live, especially where I used to live, like just getting into like making music, it's very like a country like mountain town, and so there was only small numbers of us just getting together and trying to get these events going and that kind of stuff. And eventually, it did kind of simmer down, and there are still events that go on here, and there are still shows, there are still like things like that, but it's more geared toward different audiences. There is like stuff for rock fans and stuff like that, but it is a very heavy reggae demographic here. And not that that's bad. I do love me some reggae, but it's just that is the main thing that you're gonna find here, no matter what. If that's what you're into, it's a great place to just experience it. Um, but yeah, and usually when I go out to shows like that, it is good. But luckily, I got into doing live sound, even like for theaters. Like uh, I used to do sound over here for a theater, and it kind of eventually branched off into me finding a job doing it for like weddings and parties and things like that. So I got into live sound like through that way, and so like I said, I was able to kind of take what I've learned doing like Logic and learning how to do mixing and compressing and all the technical stuff on there and like apply it to real situations and how to adjust and learn on the fly, especially in the theater. That can be some hair pulling stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, as I'm sure you know.
yeah. Trust me. Working behind the scenes in theater, it's a stressful job, but it's a fun job.
Yes.
Much more, much more, less stressful than working in front of the house. I'll just tell you that. As an illustrator, trust me. Uh,
Yeah, but I believe it.
but like theater, music does have a great connection base, and you mentioned a few artists here out in New York City. Have you met any artists that kind of like? I wouldn't. Well, have you met like any like well-known independent artists or work with independent artists, that sort of thing, especially around that area? Because you mentioned you are currently in Hawaii, but you also went, kind of like almost, you're kind of like almost based out of New York too. So,
Yeah.
have you met anyone essentially that were essentially music based in terms of, especially as a producer too? Because I know as a producer, you probably got a lot of people who say, "Hey, I'm doing a new album. Could you help me like promote it?" That sort of thing.
Yeah.
In terms of I get out in terms of like maybe networking is like how do you see okay that yeah this is a good question is like how do you network between essentially one time zone which is right now where I'm recording this like 7 o'clock at night, this is probably like 1 o'clock in the afternoon for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely. It's 103 right now.
between the time zone difference, especially in from not only from Hawaii to New York, but also say even some place in like maybe Germany or even France, something like that, where it's
Yeah.
probably close to midnight over there, or maybe even close to like something like that. How do you deal with not only the time zone differences, but something I was like, is that me? Because I know that I live near, right?
Yeah, sorry, I do live near the road, so you're gonna hear some stuff every now and then.
That's a good the magic of the actual taping thing. This is the
Yeah,
magic.
right.
But my question is, like,
Exactly.
due to the time zone differences and all that stuff, how are you able to essentially connect with people who are essentially in one time zone, while you're in essentially in a time zone that's almost like 6 hours in the past?
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting and proved to be very interesting, especially when I moved back from New York. Um, but honestly, just staying in communication. Everyone that I talk to, like Mel and Hassan, everyone like understands that there's that difference, and sometimes they don't understand just how much of a difference. But yeah, no, they do get that I may not respond on time, or if they send me something at like 7 or 8 in the morning their time, they understand that it's super, super early for me. And so, yeah, it's just understanding those grounds and doing that. I work with people in Portland too. Luckily, just having Instagram and having, social media has just made it easier to connect with people and stay connected to people and continue to support their work and have them support my work and all that kind of stuff. And actually, one of the people that I'm working with in Portland is from Italy originally. Yeah, so it's really cool how like you do slowly kind of get things around in the world. I do have a friend in Germany as well who's involved with music out there, and yeah, like I just have friends all over, and it's really cool. And just trying to stay connected is honestly the best way to go about it. Like sometimes it's not about music, just being friendly and just being human about it is good, but also just reaching out and be like, oh, I want you on this, or I want you on this, or do you
Yeah.
want to work together on this? And it's really easy once you get to that like level with a person.
So, do you have any like? I feel like this is not a question, but because do you have any defining moments for you yet, or are you still like working to find that defining moment?
I definitely working to define that defining moment, but I would say that from when I started doing this to now, I have certainly evolved, and all the imagery and all the way that I'm learning how to tell my story has changed. And I think where I'm at now with, where I'm at, like the posting on Instagram and even my music and the way that I'm able to get things out, like I'm at a level where I'm kind of happy that, I don't feel like I've had my defining moment yet. Like I feel like now I'm ready for the world to really like catch on and see me for who I am, and that's been a very empowering feeling and something I've obviously been able to kind of develop while I've worked on things during this crazy quarantine time. And yeah, I've certainly made the best of it, but I feel like my defining moment has yet to come for sure.
Now, you mentioned Instagram before, and don't worry, I will get to that portion later. But in terms of social media, which platform have you found to be most, I guess, most expressive? Because people who use Instagram, there are people who use Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, SoundCloud, LinkedIn, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And like in, and especially since nowadays anybody who wants to be somebody, they usually post their stuff on Instagram, that sort of thing, or SoundCloud.
Yeah.
In your experience, which social media platform do you feel has like the most impact in terms of not only coverage but also just like easy access?
Okay. For me personally, I think Instagram is fantastic. I mean, obviously, when they don't fuck with the algorithms, that that is nice, But I honestly, for me personally, like I've been able to do all the things that I've been able to want and say and get out and visually present on Instagram more so than Twitter and Facebook. Even though I know Twitter, I would honestly consider like the king as far as like people interacting and people responding and people getting people's attention. Like everyone responds to like Twitter and things like that. But yeah, I've stuck to Instagram, did the SoundCloud thing for a bit, and just I enjoyed the format but didn't feel like I was really able to convey like what I want to do visually. So Instagram has the best of both worlds, where I can do still images, videos, you know, just hop in and out of things that I enjoy.
Yeah, you just mentioned a good you just mentioned SoundCloud. Uh, in terms of your experience, because I've actually used SoundCloud in the past,
Okay.
mostly to upload my stuff with Clash, as you do, because we couldn't use YouTube for some reason,
Hmm.
even though it would be the most logical choice to upload your thing to YouTube and just like
Right.
privatize it to say, hey, this is Clash, no one to see, this is
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Clash, that sort of thing. But uh, do you see a lot more people still using I guess the category is called SoundCloud rappers or
Yeah.
SoundCloud musicians, something that sort of thing. Do you still
Yeah.
do you still interact, or do you still find people who are essentially SoundCloud musicians like every now and then, or has that like fad sort of like died down after like say several years? Because I know SoundCloud musicians were a big hit maybe a few years ago, but
Yeah.
but now people are becoming a lot more popular on something like TikTok now, which is essentially
Yeah.
almost similar to the same thing, where it's like, oh, you people make like almost like a minute or two things, and they put a lot of work in it, compared to people who just put in their stuff for like SoundCloud, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the SoundCloud, there is still definitely a niche for people who have that sound for like the SoundCloud thing, like people who get put into that niche, the mumble rap or whatever you want to call it. Like that whole like sect of artists do still exist and still thrive on SoundCloud, because SoundCloud is still very much a popular thing, especially after Chance the Rapper got as big as he did and started pushing SoundCloud and doing that. But for me personally, yeah, I use Bandcamp now. I did it in the very beginning, and I do now, and actually that's how I was able to kind of host it as a website, because they just offer more as far as like creativity, as far as like making your music, how you present your music, and then the community in general in Bandcamp is just usually very open and very accepting. And I don't know, I have a good time interacting with people on
Yeah.
that format. But yeah, as far as people, yeah, that kind of stuff is still very much a thing. And I've met a few people that fit into that category, and they are. It's interesting working with them because they look at things very differently sometimes. And I'll put it like that.
Do you see seeing a business kind of in terms of like say independent music things, the independent
Mhm.
music scene, especially now? Where do you see like the business like really booming? Do you see people who are like posting their snippets on like Instagram who are still using who are still using SoundCloud, Bandcamp, or even something like TikTok, or even going old school with this like posting snippets on their Snapchat and having people listen to theirs?
Yeah,
Do you still see that Instagram is like the more key area for exposure and coverage, or is there something else do you think could be much more of a credited to coverage and exposure?
I would say that for like I was saying earlier, for me I like Instagram as a personal preference, but I know that like Twitter is probably like where you're gonna get more of that exposure because you just have more people on it that are more active and more people that interact and more people that are sharing. Um, so I mean, like I said, I don't have one personally, but I know for a fact that that is definitely where people thrive if that's like what you want to do, whether it be making videos or whatever. YouTube actually is a really good one for like lo-fi and things like that. Like a lot of the instrumentals that I like to work on, just because you put like anime visuals or some kind of visual on it like that, and that works. And I've fallen in love with a lot of music just finding pages that are dedicated to like making visuals for things, and that's actually what I feel is really strong on Instagram, and why I feel as far as like for lo-fi music and things like that, sticking to like Instagram and even SoundCloud and YouTube and scouring and even doing things like Blogspot or just finding blogs, Reddit, things like that. Those are the ways to really go.
Uh, I feel right now I only like technically two questions left, but I could always expand the crap out of those two. But
No worries, no worries.
in terms of future, not future the musician, but future as in like wait like actual uh, where
Yes, it's good to clarify.
yeah uh, what can you what can we expect from you in the future, like in the coming future?
All right. Well, there's a lot coming actually. There's a new EP that's going to be dropping with in the next couple of months. I don't have a for sure date yet because me and my someone actually produced this album, so it's actually not produced by me. It's the first time I've ever taken that like endeavor and let someone else kind of handle it and get it back to me. Yeah, and it's my buddy Sean. Um, and he's been working really hard on all the instrumentals and all the vocals that I put into it. And so that'll be getting done here in a couple months. And um, after that, I have another project that I've got produced, planned to release as well. Also with my buddy Sean, who's going to be supplying like just bass. It's going to be more like I want to say Motown, like very 70s vibe I'm going for. And then after that is going to be an instrumental beat tape. And yeah, I'm just going to keep going from there. But as of right now, those are the things planned for the rest of my 2020.
Nice. Hopefully everything will go smoothly and well, knock on wood. Uh,
Right, exactly.
like everything will go smoothly for the rest of the year. So,
Right.
and I can't wait to actually hear all this stuff because as I said previously, I'm not a musician person, but I know my music, so there you go. Uh,
Right. I appreciate that.
uh, for my last question, do you have any advice for people who are listening / watching on this somehow, wherever I'm doing this in terms of the actual format? Because This is my second episode, folks. I have yet to figure out the format. Well, if you're watching this, you figured it out already. But if you're listening to this, you figured it out already. But right now, I'm still, as of right now, unsure what the format is. So, to those who are listening slash watching or both, do you have any advice?
When it comes to your art, no matter what it is, music, theater, actual physical, like, drawing and, painting and things, like, don't hinder yourself by being a perfectionist. I believe, like, we actually had the conversation prior, how you were mentioning like Adobe Premiere and how you were, you felt like you didn't like know it as well and things like that. But honestly, the more you do it, the more you just apply yourself and get yourself into it, the better it's gonna come out. Like, I didn't start off sounding super great either when it comes to singing, when it comes to making music, playing guitar. You always have that rough period. A lot of people put themselves through the rain, just like learning to get to the point where you need to get in order to just create or whatever. And so, yeah, don't overthink it. Have fun with it, but don't let people take you as a joke. Take yourself seriously, and just have that drive, and just don't stop. Don't tell yourself to stop, and don't stop because someone told you. If you enjoy it, keep doing it.
Especially if people, and especially since I know both, and like I said before, it's odd because both music and theater are almost very interlinked. Uh,
Yep.
they're very connected in a way because not only is musicals a big thing in theater, but uh, business-wise, they almost have like a similar format to each other,
Yes.
especially getting yourself over as an artist in terms of to those who want to know what over is, you have to look as a wrestling term. Okay,
We were
over.
both exactly. I get exactly what you're saying. No worries.
Over essentially means like how well you're selling in terms of the audience. So if the crowd loves you, you're over. So that's the. But essentially, it's odd how essentially how much music and theater are actually very essentially interlinked with each other because they almost are like shadow
Yeah.
shadows to each other because you have people who are you have the type of people who you'll probably see in theater be in music at the same time. You probably have the person who believes they're hot shit or think they're like a top talent of a thing, and they turns out they have like a very so-so voice or so-so acting a talent. Or then you have
Yeah.
and then you have like maybe a roadie slat or in theater term a stagehand who actually does a lot of work behind the scenes, and
Yep.
they're producing their own stuff or writing their own stuff or acting in a very side thing, like in some club somewhere like that's like somewhere between, you know, in New York terms, like say like 14th Street or something like that, in the Bowery, something like that, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
forming in a club somewhere in the Bowery, and the club itself is like very rinky dinky, that sort of thing, and they're getting paid like maybe $20, $30, something like that, just to do the thing.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's odd how both, even though I'm not, I'll not keep why I keep repeating this, but even though I'm not a musician, it's odd and it's how it's also pretty great that music and theater are essentially interlinked, like quite vividly. Uh, in
Yes.
in terms of that, do you see like music and theater just being continually like that, or is it just going to be like, or because at some point there's going to be, at some point there's no more, there's probably got to be a point in life where there's no more plays. It's just got to be musical, all that stuff. Cast albums galore, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see essentially a cross promotion between not only theater but with music in general with other things like where do you see the cross promotion happening with music just in terms of the next I'll just say in the next decade or so, especially with coronavirus happening too, so because a lot of things have been essentially uh, st- uh, there's a lot of things that are stopped because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, yeah. Not having a crowd is a huge deal, and yeah, it's funny. I very like I was on the outside looking in for a long time when it comes to theater. Like I didn't have like a an opinion on it, and when I finally got a glimpse into it by meeting people and yeah, just meeting people, um, it was really enlightening, and it is I saw how intertwined it is, and it's been like that way longer than we've been around, so I don't even think it's not going to stop it. You're going to have people who are either famous musicians that jump and do like a musical, or you'll have like like someone like famous, like the guy, I'm forgetting his name, and everyone in theater is going to hate me for it, but the guy who's famous for Hamilton.
Lynn Morel, Lynn Miranda. Oh man, I'm sorry, Lynn. If you happen to watch this one day, I'm so sorry. Or this one day, I'm so sorry. But Lynn Miranda, the guy who created Hamilton in the Heights, a lot of other stuff. Yeah, him.
Yeah, how he was able to branch off and do like, Moana and do something like that. Like I feel like theater is always going to have its way like in things, whether it be, songs in Disney movies or movies like that, or whether it just be music in general and people just having a respect for it on both ends. Like people in the music business love people in the theater business and vice versa. So I don't think that's something that's ever going to actually change. And in the future, with thing, it's going to be interesting. It really is going to be interesting how like big events change and how things like that change. And I don't really know if people on Broadway would be interested in seeing, like a completely filmed Broadway play. It's kind of like pro wrestling. You don't want to see the filmed match. You want to be there and you want to see the live thing play out and see how these people do it live. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And as of right now, I don't have a bold prediction. I do believe that they will come back, but honestly, the idea of having things be filmed and having things be strictly that isn't too far fetched. I mean, even out here there were like some musicals that did get their entire performance filmed in different angles and with you know some certain effects and things like that. And I I'm glad that they haven't gone that route completely. Because the art is in the performance itself, and I feel like they understand and respect that a lot more than other industries do. But yeah, I I will be happy to see where it goes, no matter what. As far as like what I'm doing, my music, there's streaming that's completely taken over, and as far as that goes, I can just do a Skype performance or a Zoom performance or a YouTube live performance, and still get over with people. But for me personally, because my work is very heavily based on fiction. Like my idea for playing live was always different in the first place. But yeah, my prediction is sorry to trail off there, but yeah,
Oh, no
I would
problem.
definitely certainly say that like my prediction is that it's gonna start up slow and it'll be kind of hesitant. And if things get worse, if there's like another outbreak, then yeah, I would say you might start seeing musicals still happen and be produced, but be more like a production. You know what I mean? Like with film and camera and sets, and
Yeah.
it almost being more like like a TV thing.
And with that, I conclude episode 2, I believe. Yeah, this is episode 2 of Performing the Arts.
Woohoo!
Uh, Thank you once again, 60-bit wanderer, aka Blaine. If I hope I was pronouncing that correctly. Uh,
Yeah, no, you're on it, and it's funny too because your accent, the way you say 64-bit wanderer, is is very interesting. But that's just me.
it's a New York thing. I have a way of saying certain words. So.
It's all good. It's all good. But I appreciate it,
Oh,
and thank you for having me.
and now that I remember it, what is that social media account I need you to X to plug? Oh yeah, Twitter account. What did you put? No, what?
Okay. It's Instagram.com/or at 64-bit wanderer. That is the same with YouTube. My main website is just 64bitwanderer.com. It's nothing complicated. It's usually pretty straightforward. So yeah, 64bitwanderer.com, and that will get you to all my music, and it'll take you to SoundCloud if that's what your deal is, or Spotify, whatever your deal is. Just come check it out. You'll know you'll like it.
And with that, everyone else, enjoy the rest of your time. I hope you enjoyed this interview. Me trailing off somewhere, but otherwise, enjoy the rest of the day, folks.